Hi everyone, Peter Mullen here. Now we're just giving everybody a couple of seconds just to click in, and Dana's going to send me a little message through when we are ready to go. Now, beautiful day outside here in downtown Newcastle. I hope everyone's having a great day where they are. So right, we're ready to go. So hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Healthy Living. I'm Peter Mullen from Mullen Natural Health Centre in Newcastle, New South Wales. And today I am so excited to be speaking with one of my favourite inspirational speakers and someone whom I admire greatly, Petrea King. Now, Petrea is the CEO of the Quest for Life Foundation, which she established in 1989. She's a well-known author, inspirational keynote speaker, teacher, facilitator. She's also qualified as a naturopath, so she's one of my crew. Herbalist, clinical hypnotherapist, yoga and meditation teacher. And Petrea is someone who Richard Glover from the ABC radio has described as one of those rare Australians who have changed the country for the better. Good afternoon, Petrea.
Hello, Peter. Lovely to be with you and everyone.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I was so chuffed when you agreed to talk with me, because I think what we're going to be talking about today is so relevant for all of us. Now, before we get into things, I must say, your book up until now, I loved it. I couldn't put it down. I've passed it on to that many people. Your story is one that I felt was quite remarkable, and I really felt I connected with you with your journey. So congratulations on that book.
Thank
and
you.
You have played such a key role in helping thousands of people find peace and healing in their personal journeys through life. I thought for starters, and really today I really just want to be a bit of a conversation between you and I, so I'm not going to even look at my script anymore. Can you tell us a bit for starters about your journey, how you've arrived where you are? And I know that's a big ask in a short period of time.
Well, of course, there's a big difference between the bones of a person's story and the flesh that hangs off the bones. It's in the flesh that all of the emotions of that journey might be held. But my story, I grew up with a brother who probably invented ADHD 20 years ahead of anyone knowing what that was. And Brendan was 22 months older than I and spent his childhood falling off the roof or painting it with lipstick or setting fire to the house, or every morning started off with him putting the plate of porridge over his head the moment my mother's attention was turned. So I remember even in my high chair sitting there watching this sort of drama unfold. And I think I did invisible really, really well for a long time. So I had absolutely no needs at all. And I know as a little girl, I was terribly constipated. Even going to the toilet for me was a bit of a scary thing. I felt like I shouldn't make any noise. I really shouldn't be here, basically, because Brendan pretty much filled the house. And then he told me before he was 10 that he knew he had to kill himself by the time he was 30. And that was a catalyst for me. I thought, that's why I'm alive. I'm here to make sure that Brendan stays safe. And I remember thinking, I have to grow up really quickly so I can look after him. And interestingly, I grew 23 centimetres in the next 15 months. And that deranged the bone growth in my legs, and my knees started dislocating and I couldn't stand up or walk. So I left school at the end of year 7 and went into hospital, and had virtually 3 years in hospital, sort of 3 months in, a month out, 6 months in, a month out, 9 months in traction, a month out. That went on for 3 years while they cut my femurs and turned my lower legs out 11 degrees, and then cut my tibias and turned them in. And then they did that all over again. And it was a long, about a dozen surgeries. And at one stage they said I'd never walk again. And but I remember that gritty determination when I was told I'd never walk again, of unhooking the traction unit in the middle of the night. And by then my legs, literally, I could put those 2 fingers around my calf. They were just these 2 white hairy sticks in the bed. And I could use every ounce of my willpower and I couldn't move either of them. But I would lift them out of the bed and take my weight on my arms, and I'd get around the bed. I could feel the bones grating. But it united in 3 weeks. And so I also developed this very private inner life. And then on the outside, I kept a facade highly polished for everyone else. And I know I'm not alone in this, that what we project to the world is often completely at odds with what's going on inside. I went from there to nursing, which wasn't that bright after so much surgery. I went out the back of Cunnamulla after I was raped when I was 17 while I was in a back brace. I wanted to get as far away from people as I could. It was in a house where there were people, but I still didn't have a voice. I was so used to, shh, be quiet, it'll be over soon, whatever it is. I just didn't have a voice to call out. I married some very odd people. My own self-esteem, I think, was so poor that I attracted people who really reinforced it for me. I had 2 beautiful children. Brendan attempted suicide several times, and sometimes I was the one to get him to the hospital. But finally, he did succeed in taking his own life when he was 32 in Kathmandu. So there was no body, no funeral, no memorial, no packing up of possessions. It was very challenging to take on board the reality of his death. I used to walk with walking sticks. I was so crippled with arthritis. Just after that, my husband and I moved to America to do our yoga and meditation teacher training. We'd only been there 4 weeks when I thought he'd gone for a long walk, but he'd gone back to Australia, and leaving me with 2 small children in this geodesic dome out in the desert. And just after that, I was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. And I have to say I was relieved, because by now I was a naturopath, because having all that time in hospital, I knew that I was withholding healing. I didn't know how, but I knew that when my femur united after 9 months in traction, I'd have to go back to school. And I couldn't cope with school. There was just no way I could cope with that number of people. I didn't know how to grow up. Brendan was just ahead of me making a mess of it. And so being in hospital during that time was really fabulous, because I read voraciously and read encyclopedias and Thomas Merton and Krishnamurti and Alan Watts and Aldous Huxley and all of these amazing authors who actually talked about what I was interested in as to why are we here? What's the point of human existence? How do you know you've lived the life you came here to live? And what are you going to do about that? So those were always questions for me. And it wasn't really until I was confronted with my mortality and I realized I had so much intellectual understanding of the spiritual perspective on life, an energetic perspective on life, or a spiritual perspective on life. I had it all up here, but it wasn't a lived experience. I was not at peace in myself. And so when I faced my own death, for me, what became really important is, how do I find peace before I die? And I didn't expect to live. I absolutely thought I would die. And I wanted to find peace, at peace with myself, at peace with my history, at peace with the world before I died. And I found the peace, but then I didn't die.
Which is much to the delight of everybody that knows you today, I'm sure.
Well, I don't know about that. But anyway, I was incredibly grateful. But I think as a naturopath, and indeed, it's just a human thing we do, that if we do this, and this, then that's meant to happen. And you can do this, and this, and then something completely unexpected happens. So I used to have this kind of fanciful idea that if you lived a good life and you did your best to be a good person, then terrible things don't happen to you. But of course, I found out since that that's far from the truth.
Yeah, Patria, and again, that was just a very short summation of your life story so far. And I really appreciate you sharing all of that, because it just gives everybody a bit of background of who you are, where you've come from. So as naturopaths, and I think it's really important when we talk about healing, and we'll talk about your the difference between healing and curing in a moment, but from a naturopathic point of view, you know, a big part of our belief is that we're not just that physical body.
Mm.
You know, we have a physical being, we have an emotional component, we have a mental being, and we're spiritual beings at the start of all of that. And I remember 25 years ago, one of my patients came to see me and said that, you know, she'd been to see her doctor and told the doctor that she thought she was stressed. This was only 25 years ago, and the doctor said, there's no such thing as stress. That's just a new age concept.
Yeah.
So thinking how far we've come with our understanding of, you know, mental and emotional well-being, and, you know, hopefully starting to embrace that idea of this spiritual side of ourselves as well. Healing and curing. What do you see as the difference between the two?
Well, you know, I think first of all, we have to recognize that everything is energy. You know, we know that I'm sitting here at a desk, and when you stub your toe, when you bang into it, it definitely feels solid. But we know that when you penetrate down and down and down and down and down, all you're going to find is space and little spinning packets of energy. And that's what our bodies are as well. And indeed, your body exists within the electrical field of your consciousness that surrounds you. We know that can be measured 5 to 8 feet out from the heart, because it's generated from the heart, not the brain. Mm. And just the same as the earth has a magnetic field, we too have a magnetic field. And so that is actually who we are. And that is what's enmeshed into the body. So if you only treat the body, you're always working from the gross to the subtle. Whereas really we need to work from the subtle, and then it resonates all the way through into the gross. So for instance, we know that when a newborn baby is born, only 15% of the brain is wired up, and that's around loud noises being dropped, how to seek for food, how to suckle. The other 85% will be laid down not according to what you think, but according to how you feel. And so in those first few weeks, months, years, and most of it's gone in by the time we're 3, according to how we feel, that is what is taken on through our consciousness and delivered via neurotransmitters, which are secreted by the brain and ultimately the gut, because next to the brain, the gut secretes the most neurotransmitters, which are the chemistry of your emotion. And so we secrete this chemistry over and over again according to how we feel in the family dynamics. If we feel under threat, if we feel unsafe, if we feel abused, if we feel traumatized in some way, it's going to have a profound impact on how we grow up. Because those neurotransmitters on the surface of every cell, there are thousands of your 50 trillion cells in your body. There are thousands of receptor sites on every single cell. And these receptor sites are particularly geared, obviously, for your nutrition and for the hormones in your body. And it's affected by the quality of your sleep, your exercise, the chemicals that are in the environment, the chemicals that you might introduce into your body, and the chemistry of your emotions. That's what's in the epigenetic environment around the cell. So gradually, as we continue to experience our family dynamics and we grow into that family, where in my case, I became the quiet one. My brother was definitely the noisy one. But you might be the bright one, the responsible one, the clever one, the musical one, the athletic one, whatever. And so we practice this particular persona, and it's literally wired into our cells according to the neurotransmitters that we've experienced. And so all of that becomes second nature to us. And it's interesting that we call it second nature, because you'll hear people often say, oh, it's second nature for me to think like this, feel like this, react like this.
True.
And no one ever questions, well, what's your first nature?
Yeah.
What was there before you took that on? And so we set off on that journey believing I'll be happy at some future time, because we've got the I'll be happy when story as well. I'll be happy once my life looks a particular way. And at some stage, most of us are stopped in our tracks because of we call them the Ds. A drama, a disappointment, a disaster, a divorce, a diagnosis, a death, a disfigurement, a disability, a disagreement, a disloyalty, a debt, a drought, a downpour, a downturn. Who knew there were so many Ds?
So many negative Ds as well. We'll have to come up with a positive list.
And when we hit that D, everything that's second nature to us doesn't work. So it might be second nature to us to blame other people for our unhappiness. It might be second nature to drown our sorrows by having that extra glass or bottle. It might be second nature to us to isolate, to go into an old pattern. I'll do it myself. It might be second nature to us to not sleep all the time, not eat, overeat. But this D demands more from us than we've ever had to draw on up until now. And we get to that fabulous place where we say, that's it. Something's got to change, and it's me. I can't change the D. I can change how I choose to see that and how I choose to respond to that. Now, some people at that point say, I can only have peace. Say you've been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. I can only have peace if I don't die. If I'm addicted, I have to have a cure. Otherwise, I'm not going to have any peace. Then you could be on tricky territory if you have a life-threatening illness. I'm all for, have a preference. My preference was definitely to live, because my children were 4 and 7. No one can love my children the way I can love them. But what I realized was that there's a kind of frenetic energy around having to get the cure. Am I drinking enough juice? Do I have my crystals on? Did I get the affirmations right? Did I meditate long enough, deep enough? Do I have to earn my right to exist? And so for me, healing is about peace. And the fact is, when you have peace, and peace is not a passive, wishy-washy state of acceptance, it's a dynamic state in which we feel able to embrace every moment, regardless of its challenges, with a quiet mind and an open heart. That's my definition of health and peace. It's our ability to embrace every moment, regardless of how challenging, how complex, how critical it is, with a quiet mind, free of chatter, and an open, compassionate heart, free of judgment. So those are the qualities of our first nature as well. And so when we hit that D, instead of saying, I have to have a cure in order for me to be at peace, that's got that kind of frenetic, what do I have to do to get it right so that I can cure this? To my preference is definitely to live. And in the meantime, I'm going to affirm life by every breath I take, by every morsel I eat, by every thought I hold, by my ability to witness and be skillful with my emotions. Because like a lot of people, I didn't even know what I was feeling. You know, if you don't grow up with emotional literacy, when you're 3, 4, 5, we don't have the awareness to say, oh, isn't this interesting? I feel scared. We just feel it. And then as children, we generally make up beliefs to explain to ourselves why we're having that experience. So for me, the difference between healing and curing is about the body. Healing is about the heart, the spirit, the being that enlivens the body. When we find peace, that has a profound epigenetic impact. And that's why we see people who go all out for peace, for this dynamic resilience in the midst of challenge. That's why we see them far outlive their doctor's expectations, if they were given any. Some are in remission when they were never expected to have a remission, and many are free of their disease decades down the track when that was never expected. And when I looked at all of these people, I'd love to say they all did the same things, but they didn't. They had particular characteristics in common. And these are the characteristics really of peace of mind. So I'm all for healing, because healing is always possible, whereas curing a person is not.
I think that's such a beautiful way of explaining what healing is. And I think for a lot of people listening, that goes across all health issues, whether you're struggling with eczema, whether I had a young lady, a beautiful young lady that I saw this morning who is struggling with managing her weight. And I think weight's such a great example of, and weight issues and the social stigma and the peer pressure and all of that that goes with weight, that, you know, for a lot of us, you know, we'll be happy when our weight's down to a certain point. And I think what you're saying resonates with everybody, no matter what health, where their whole health is up to. And I think, so I think that's such a wonderful lesson, Patri. And we'll talk a bit more about what we can actually, how we can go about finding peace, because I guess that's the million-dollar question that, you know, I'd like you to tell me in three lines or less what we all have to do to find this inner peace.
Yeah.
But just about the other point I'd just like to make, when you were talking about emotional literacy, no one teaches us, or our parents didn't teach us, or no one teaches us about this, about emotional literacy, about how to understand our emotions, about how to embark more upon this journey towards finding inner peace.
That's so true, isn't it? Because our parents are doing the best they know how, given who they are, what happened to them and what they made of it. So oftentimes we're either passing on what we were given, or we get to a place where we're definitely not going to pass on what we were given, and we go in a slightly different, sometimes completely opposite direction to the way that we were parented as children. And I think I was in my late 30s before I realized that one of the feelings I lived with a lot was, I had to struggle to even name what it was, but it was the feeling of impending doom. For someone else, that might be anxiety. But for me, it was activation of this fight-flight mechanism that I would have as a child, because I was forever terrified of what Brendan was going to do next. You know, is he going to fall off the roof? Is he going to break his leg? Is he? And so, you know, we had the fight-flight mechanism, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, but we also have two other ones. One is we go into freeze, because if you had a lot of trauma in your childhood, you couldn't run, you couldn't fight, and you possibly went into freeze, which is we don't know what to say, we don't know what to do. And it's very uncomfortable for us. The other one we can go into is fragile. We just go completely to pieces. So if you, as an adult, you find that you're the sort of person who comes up with the best retort to an argument a week after you've had the argument, you're probably a freezer, you know, someone who isn't good on their feet in the moment. Yeah,
that's definitely me. Like,
me too.
Awesome things to say about a week after I've had a discussion with you.
Indeed. You know, a lot of this really, though, Peter, is about brain structure. When we're born, you know, the first thing to get activated is the brain stem, the very most primitive part of the brain, which is to keep you alive, to keep you breathing, to keep you able to detect and respond to motor stimulus and so on. The next part of the brain is the limbic system, which is where the amygdala and the hippocampus. The limbic system is more about your emotional development. So first comes just the physical, getting your body happening, then that emotional development. And if that's a little bit precarious, we may find then the cortical, which is the third and most sophisticated brain, is really influenced by what happens in that more primitive brain. And so once we understand that we're often reacting from the primitive brain of reaction, and that's not engaging our neocortex, which is about motivation and memory and perseverance and logic and reason and personality and morals and ethics. So that's all, if we're absent with all of that, we're only being driven by the primitive part of our brain, which is all about our survival. And so we may not be very skillful in an argument or in a complex situation because we can't access these higher functioning. And of course, when we meditate, we grow the connections in our neocortex. So we know that you have about 100 billion nerve cells in your brain, neurons in your brain. And each one of those 100 billion neurons has up to 10,000 connections to other neurons. Well, that's more than all the stars in the galaxies. Amazing. So it's extraordinary. And last century, we thought you were born with so many brain cells and then we killed them off with too much partying. This century, we know that the average person creates 700 brand new neurons every single day from the hippocampus, and that the brain is actually set up to heal past trauma. And it's fairly recent that we're beginning to understand how this happens for people, but we know that the brain has a whole healing mechanism to heal us from trauma so that we don't keep reacting throughout our life with the lessons that we learned as very small people.
And I think that whole point about that a lot of us are, particularly in stressful situations, we're reacting, you know, using our second nature, like to react in a certain way, to get angry, to get, you know, to blame people. And when you're discussing that development of the brain, I think two points stand out for me. Number one, I think a lot of people look at their childhood and they say, no, I had a beautiful childhood. I had lovely parents. They don't necessarily realize that issues or challenges they're having now may well have been the way they coped or the way they perceived life in that early age, even without any perceived stress or trauma.
Yes.
That makes sense, doesn't it? Like it's a journey we're all on to find inner peace. And that those early years do have a big imprint upon how we're going to develop.
Absolutely. We've had as many people in our programs who had blissfully happy childhoods that never set them up for dealing with stresses when they came.
Yeah.
So the first disappointment or the first death, you know, I've known people who never had to grieve until they were in their 50s. No one had died in their family until they were in their 50s. And that was the first thing that had ever gone wrong in their life, and it completely throws them. Whereas people like myself, who had quite a number of traumas and challenges as a child, actually made me really self-reliant and resilient. And so whether you had a miserable childhood or a blissful one, we've all got work to do when life happens to us.
I think that's a good point. I think we're all in the boat. We're all in this together, aren't we? We all have work to do.
Exactly.
When you were describing the behavior, like with the development of the different parts of the brain as well, you can see why we're seeing such an increase in kids being diagnosed with ADD and brain-related conditions. You know, it's such a primitive part of the brain that they're responding from.
Yes.
A big, you know, we're talking about the pandemic at the moment, but the biggest pandemics that we're all seeing are conditions like anxiety and mental health disorders.
Yes.
You know, that's far outweighing any other issue for me, with a lot of, and so many young kids that I'm seeing being diagnosed with these conditions and anxiety at such a young age. And it kind of makes sense what you're saying, that, you know, that brain development is just so critical, and we don't get that resilience training.
That's right. And indeed, sometimes I think we've got such a strong focus on children's cognitive abilities and developing those at an early age. When I look at my grandchildren in preschool, in daycare, it can be a very stimulating environment where they are stimulated to learn, but we also need a lot of daydreaming time where we stare into space and we imagine and we fantasize and we do a lot of that. That's really important in early childhood as well. So we don't want our children so structured that they all become the same, and because we educate them the same way, whether they're someone who could be educated quite differently,
Yeah.
I know education for my son was just expensive childminding, really, because he was marginally above feral for most of his life, his school life. But he's a beautiful, affectionate, loving father to his son. He's been fully employed all of his life. He's a beautiful human being, but school was not his cup of tea. He's a very bright person, a bit like me. Not that I'm saying I was bright, because I thought I was stupid up until I was in my 50s, because I'd left school at the end of year 7. So I've always thought I must be stupid. And I was actually in my 50s before I thought, no, actually I'm all right. And Simon, my son, he has this voracious curiosity about so many subjects. So he's educated himself about the things that he's really interested in. But trying to make children, you know, in some kind of cookie cutter way, that they all come out with the same level of education, which doesn't take into account the personality, the passions, the interests of the child. I think we're missing something there. And imagine if we went to schools where our interests were nurtured and catered for. Imagine if school really was designed for the child, rather than the child has to fit in with the educational system that's available.
And I think it's such a massive area, like the whole, like just while you were talking there, I became aware of, like, as a parent, and you know, with my parents, like that sense of what's the word? Almost like disappointment.
Mm.
You know, that you feel as a child that you weren't enough, or you weren't. And I think as a parent this day and age as well, there's so much pressure on parents to have the children that are good at, like, it's not just the kid, the pressure on the kids.
Yeah.
I think the pressure on the parents, and then the parents' unconscious sense of disappointment that their child's not the best cricket player, or they're not the top of their class. I think that's probably such a generational thing as well, like that we really need to address as well.
Oh, I so agree. You know, stress is huge. We know that stress, we've known this probably for 2 decades, that stress is the greatest contributor to dementia and Alzheimer's. We've known that for 2 decades. And yet nothing, they're always looking for a tablet that'll fix it. And of course, dementia, one of the, well, so far they've identified 16 contributing factors to dementia, 2 of which are genetic. Nutrition, sleep, exercise, these are all part of the 16. Unprocessed childhood trauma is one of the 16. And you see the brain cells, neurons, don't like cortisol at all. Cortisol is meant to be a short, sharp secretion that we have in our autonomic nervous system that switches us on to deal with the saber-toothed tiger. That's historically what that system is for. So, and in running like mad from the saber-toothed tiger, or in fighting it, we used up all of the cortisol in our body, because the blood went from our organs out to our muscles, and so we could run or fight. And in running or fighting, we use up all of that biochemistry. So down come all of our cortisol levels. And interestingly, when your cortisol levels are high, your immune system doesn't function at all. Your T cells just go into a state of inertia, because they cannot function, because you don't need your immune system when you're dealing with a saber-toothed tiger or a bear. You need to be able to run like mad or fight. And so if you run like mad and you fight, down come all of the stress chemicals, up comes your immune system to deal with the consequences. But now we're married to the bear, or our weight is the bear, or the boss is the bear.
Yeah.
And the answer is not to run, the answer is not to fight. And so we're left with high cortisol in our body, which is actually diabolical for the brain, really bad for the brain. And we have such a huge stress on people to look a certain way, to, you know, have the accoutrements of life that we think show that you're an okay person. You know, it's like some people go to enormous expense to dress up their physical body in labels that show that they must be successful in order to be able to wear that label. Or they drive a particular kind of car, because if you drive that car, you must be a pretty cool person. Or then you've got to live in a particular kind of mansion, so that, you know, it's like an outer body again that says to the world, I'm okay. Look at me. I live in this. I drive this. I wear this. I must be an okay human being. Whereas really that peace comes from within ourselves, not from the outer accoutrements of our life, not even what's going on in our own body when it's to do with weight or chronic pain. You know, I live with chronic pain after many, many surgeries, and I got new knees a few years ago, and that set off neuropathy in my legs. So, but I don't feel like chronic pain impinges on how I live my life. I have it really well managed. And so my inner reality is not dictated to me by what's happening in my body. We're not our bodies, we've got them. And we need to nourish them, rest them, exercise them. But we're not our brain, we've got one, and we need to quieten it down. Because when the brain is in service to us, instead of running the show, which is what's happening for most people most of the time, when the brain is quiet and in our service, we have access to some particular qualities that are only available to us in the present moment. Insight, intuition, wisdom, humor, spontaneity, creativity, and compassion. Now, those 7 qualities are all qualities that are only available to us in the present moment. The moment our brain is telling us a story about the future, because it's always jumping 5 seconds, weeks, months, years into the future, 5 seconds, weeks, months, years into the past. And when it's in the past, rehashing, regurgitating, resenting, blaming, shaming, or when it's in the future and it's anxious and worrying and fretting about what might happen, could happen, probably won't happen, not only have we lost our connection to the present, we are secreting a physiology to match wherever our consciousness has gone into fretting, fearing, worrying, blaming, shaming, bitter. So we're creating a physiology in our body that's to do with the past or the future. Whereas if we keep our brain focused in the present moment, and we've constantly got access to those really valuable qualities, insight, don't we all need insight into what's going on?
More than ever.
Intuition, the ability to pick up what's not being said, what's not being seen. Wisdom, heaven knows we need wisdom right now. Humor and spontaneity are always present time qualities. Creativity, you can't be in creation if you're not in the present moment. And compassion is the natural state of our first nature. In fact, all those qualities are the qualities of our first nature, not what's become. It's second nature to us to judge ourselves and others. It's second nature for us to project into the future, into the past. But it's not your first nature. And you may have a disease in your body or a physiology or a way of processing things in your body that are in accordance with your second nature. But as you make that return journey home to your essential nature, you're literally changing your physical health, because you're changing what's in the epigenetic environment around the cell.
Such a fantastic thing that's happening more and more. Like we've known about the benefits of meditation and mindfulness for so many years, but science is now really confirming that as well for,
yes,
you know, for those of us that need that more scientific validation. But so Patria, I guess that's the question then. So how do we go about, well, firstly, yeah, how do we go about, where's the place to start? We want to start that journey of finding inner peace, get back to our true nature,
yes,
learn more about responding, not reacting.
yes.
Where do we start?
Well, you always start where you are, of course. And one of the most effective ways of staying connected to the present moment is simply to come to our senses And this is something that I would practice in every waking moment. I don't think 5 minutes would ever go past that I'm not coming to my senses. It's what we say to people when they're having a panic attack or an anxiety attack. We say, come to your senses. And we say it for a really good reason. Your body is always in the present moment. It's your brain that takes you off into the future or into the past. So if we stay connected with the senses of our body, so even while you're sitting listening or driving listening or however you might be listening, you can be aware of your body's weight and posture, the shape of your body and its posture. You can be aware of what's supporting your body, the seat or the floor beneath your feet. You can feel the touch of your clothing and be aware of its texture and the temperature that your clothing helps create. Perhaps you can feel the touch of the air against your cheeks, your hands. You can notice any taste in your mouth or any aroma in the air or what falls within your gaze or any sight behind closed eyes. And then you can stay connected to your listening and let your listening run right out till you hear the clouds passing by. And the breath, the sensations of the inward and outward breath. You see, it's impossible to do a simple little practice like that and be in the future at the same time or in the past. You have to be here now. And as soon as you do that, the brain begins to quieten down all of its unmanaged electrical activity. And it comes into our service rather than running the show. One of our programs, in fact, we have one starting today, is called Reclaiming Your Brain. And it's for those who want to age really healthily with their memory, concentration, focus really well intact. Because we know that by the time people start getting educated about dementia in their 70s, it's too late.
Yeah.
We really need to start in our 30s, in our 40s, so that we're living healthy lifestyles where we're living on purpose, fulfilling what we came to the planet to do, that we're taking good care of our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being, and that we're in service to life, because that's where happiness comes from, making a contribution that can only be made by you, living a meaningful life. And so if we have a whole population doing that, wouldn't that be amazing?
What a different world that would be.
Indeed.
Patria, about mindfulness and bringing yourself to your senses, like even while you were going through that, it was really lovely. I could feel like my brain just quietened down, you know, just from that few moments of just bringing that awareness back into our sense or our senses. Mindfulness, what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation?
Meditation is the formal practice where we sit down and purposefully make the intention to watch the activity that's going on in our body, in our brain, in our mind, what our experience is without judgment, just letting things come, letting them go, letting sensations come and go, thoughts, feelings, stories, images come and go. So it's the formal setting aside of time for the discipline of witnessing my experience without getting caught up in that experience. And mindfulness is simply to take that then into every moment of your life, that we live with that awareness of what's going on within and around us so that we can respond moment by moment. In our programs, we talk a lot about the difference between a reaction and a response, because those two words now are used interchangeably in the media, and they're two really different words. And I'd encourage our viewers to really use these words appropriately from now on. A reaction is always in the body. When we're reacting to someone, it'll be in the gut, the heart rate, the breathing might change, our head's going to burst, our jaw gets tense, our shoulders, our neck, we might go wobbly in the legs, we get sweaty palms. So every one of us will have a particular reactivation favorite place in their body. Now, no one said take reactability for your life. They said take responsibility. So your ability to respond to the life that you're having. So instead of reacting as a victim, we need to learn how to respond as an adult. Now, a reaction also is automatic. A response requires consideration. A reaction is what's behind road rage, domestic violence, murder, most crime. Up comes a feeling, and it's out of the fist, out of the mouth, out of the slammed door before you know what's happened. That's a reactivation. And if you think about a time when you were seriously reacting to someone or something, and you were to ask yourself, how old do I feel right now? We're always, people say, oh, I'm 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And what you are literally doing is reactivating the physiology of the 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old who felt out of their depth. They didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. And you live it again as an adult. A response takes you into new territory. A reaction repeats what you've done before. And if we always do what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always got. But also, if you have a disease or even obesity or arthritis or any of these discomforts, if you always do what you've always done, why would things change? And yet a response takes us into new territory. A response literally changes what's in the epigenetic. Epi means above genes. So last century, we thought all diseases were genetically determined. And if we just found the wrong gene and snipped it off, we'll have world peace. We'll just snip off all the problematic genes. This century, we know from epigenetics that it's the environment around the cell that's informing through the receptor sites to the interior of the cell, whether the gene should express, modify its expression, or stay suppressed. So last century, we were helpless victims of our genes. This century, we're co-creators of our health, because what's in the epigenetic environment is impacted by what we're eating and drinking, the quality of our sleep, the quality of our exercise, the chemistry of our emotions, and the chemicals that are in the environment, some of which we have control over, some of which we don't. So that's all that's in that epigenetic environment. So if we change that by improving nutrition, exercise, sleep, by finding peace of mind and changing from a stressful way of being to a calm inner equilibrium, you're very much changing what's in the epigenetic environment, which is why we see remarkable remissions and healings when their doctors didn't hold out any hope for them at all.
I love that we're the co-creators of our health. And I think that's definitely the missing link, is the chemistry of emotions.
Yes.
I think that's a place we haven't quite broached enough or taken into consideration with all health issues, whether they're life-threatening or not. So,
well, when you consider what's in the epigenetic environment, so nutrition, no one talks about nutrition. Even when you've got cancer, they tell you can eat what you like, it won't make any difference. Sleep, no one, your oncologist doesn't say, how's your sleep? Exercise, now they have picked on it. I didn't mean to do that, but they have picked on exercise, and they've done a lot of research around exercise.
Yes.
And indeed, if you're having chemo, radiotherapy, they want you exercising on the day you have the treatment. So they have done a lot of research around exercise. The chemistry of your emotions, well, they don't go near that. And the chemicals that are in the environment, they certainly don't go near that. So actually, the word doctor means educator, and we need to be educating our patients around their nutrition, their sleeping, their exercise. And our poor overweight people, you know, food is just not what it was when I was a girl now. Food is so different from, I'm 68, and food has changed dramatically in my lifetime. We used to buy food that was grown either just outside of Sydney out in Windsor, Richmond, out in that area. And it was delivered and consumed certainly within a week. And yet now we know from the big fresh food people that food can be in the fridge for 3 years before it comes onto the market.
Yeah.
You know, you can buy it at the beginning of the grape season. They bring out old grapes first. Those are the ones with the brown twigs, and they're even pruned at the top of the grape. Those are 3 years old. The ones that have twigs, but they're not pruned at the top, 2 years old. The ones that have thick, twiggy stalks, they're usually 1 year old. And obviously this season's grapes have green stalks because they've just been picked. So we're just getting the population used to a lower caliber of food, and it has less nutrition in it. So why wouldn't people eat more looking for nutrition? Because they're not getting it in the food anymore. We need to be eating organic food, which we know is denser, is more flavorful, more nutritious, less watery, because other foods are bred to increase water because it'll be heavier at the till. So we know that organic food, you actually eat less because you're more satisfied, and it's actually cheaper in the long run because you'll find the whole family eats less because they're more nutritionally satisfied.
That's fine. So Petrea, with a place for people to start, so practice of bringing ourselves back to our senses.
Yes.
Meditation. Do you recommend, or do you meditate daily yourself?
Absolutely, yes, and have done fortunately since I was 17.
I did read that. I read that somewhere. I was very impressed. Like, that's a lot of wisdom you've had even as a young lady.
Oh, well, I'd say a lot of desperation, because pain and despair will drive you to a willingness to see things differently.
So listeners listening, so learning a style of meditation that resonates with them.
Yes.
And then so bringing ourselves to our senses, practicing mindfulness. Do you have some good resources? You do at the Quest for Life. You're down in the Southern Highlands at Bundanoon.
Yes, we are. Yeah, we're about 200 metres from the railway station, so a lot of people arrive by train, but they come from all over Australia, except Victoria, of course, at the moment, and Queensland. But people, and indeed from overseas, we get quite a few people who come to us from other countries as well. And we run programs every week at the moment because the demand has been so high, and they're 5-day programs. And we've got 6. We have Reclaiming Your Brain that I mentioned, Quest for Life for people with physical illnesses who are looking at how do I create an environment for healing. Healing Your Life, which is for people with depression, anxiety, loss, grief, trauma. We have Moving Beyond Trauma for people with a post-traumatic stress injury. We don't call it a disorder. We get a lot of police and paramedics and veterans and domestic violence, sexual assault, sexual abuse from childhood in the PTS program. What else do we have? We have Healing Grief for parents of kids who've taken their own life. That's a new program because we see so many parents of young people who've ended their own life through suicide, and they really gain so much when they come together. I think that's most of the, and Taking Control of Chronic Pain for people who live with chronic pain. And that's delivered by 2 wonderful physiotherapists who's head of the pain clinic at Nepean Hospital. I'm part of that program because I think that lived experience of chronic pain is a really valuable perspective in the program as well. And indeed, in all of our programs, whilst all of our facilitators and counsellors and support team members are highly qualified, they also need to have suffered and worked with their own suffering, because that's really the best qualification for working with people who are in a very distressed state. The level to which we're willing to go to our own distress is the level to which we'll be comfortable around other people who need to explore theirs. And so this is a very safe, nurturing environment in which people feel that they can utter the unutterable and have it witnessed and acknowledged. And then they learn all of this stuff about how the brain, the body works, and how they can get back in the driver's seat of their own life so that they can respond to the challenges that they have rather than continue to react to them.
Patria, with what we've been talking about today, a good resource, I've noticed at the moment that you're doing a nightly recap,
yes,
review, followed by a meditation practice. So if anyone listening wants to do some meditation or start to practice meditation, they're welcome to join your Facebook group. And
they're very welcome. It's just the Patria King Meditation Group. At the moment, we're back to every Monday evening at 7:30. And then on the Patria King Quest for Life Foundation Facebook page, our facilitators do half an hour on Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11 a.m. And on the first Sunday of every month, there's Quest Connect, which is for an hour with one of our facilitators. So people can go to our webpage, which is questforlife.com.au, and that's where all of our programs and connections to the Facebook groups and all the information about the programs that we have is there as well.
that's fantastic, Patria. And for those of you listening today, that I can really highly recommend having a look at Patria's sites. She's got some fantastic information there. She also has CDs that you can purchase to start to get in the practice of meditation. But I think embracing this is all about us finding that peace within ourselves and really healing ourselves individually. We need these resources. We need to learn meditation and practice mindfulness. And so, Patria, thank you so much today. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. Unfortunately, I think I could spend an afternoon with you.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's been really lovely talking with you too. And I really hope that our viewers have got something out of this time. I guess what I'd love to say to people is that peace is always possible. And when you have peace, magic happens in your body. And that we can be conscious co-creators of our life experience, and that can have a profound and positive impact on our physical health and certainly on our mental health. If we can align ourselves with life and be in the present moment, and we align ourselves with life by how we care for our physical, mental, emotional and spiritual well-being, because we want to be a living expression of life. Life, love, God, all the same thing to me. And so if we align ourselves with that, then how do we make a contribution? Because that's where happiness comes from, is the contribution that we make to life. And we can all do that. It's not about neon lights and flashing big stories. It's in how we prepare a meal, how we turn a garden, how we grow a child. Those are where love shows up, and that's where creation is unfolding, and we can all participate in that.
I think that's so beautiful. Thank you again so much, Patria.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for watching today. I'm hoping that you're all as inspired as what I have been, as always, when I hear Patria speak. Now, following in a little moment, when we finish the webinar, a little survey form will pop up. So please, if you could take the time to fill out the survey, we'd value your feedback, suggestions for future webinars, etc. And tomorrow we'll be sending an email out to everybody, and we'll have some links to Patria's website and her Facebook page. So you can get on and click through and have a look and do some meditation with Patria. I find it's been just amazing. We'll also, on the email, we'll send you out, we get so many letters and emails and thank you for doing these webinars. So really, to show your gratitude, if you could, we'd love you to give us a review. So there'll be a link tomorrow on that email to give us a review, because the more reviews we get, the more we can push these wonderful videos and people like Patria out to a much wider audience as well. So if you could do that, that would be great. And Patria, once again, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to talking with you soon.
Lovely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Have
Thank
a great
you.
week.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Bye-bye.